Welcome to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast with Darren Mitchell. If you're a sales leader looking to take your leadership to a whole new level, then this is the podcast for you. We'll be exploring tips, techniques, and strategies to help you take your leadership to the exceptional level and allow you to enjoy more money, more meaning, and better sales results.
Very easy, guys.
I'm just wondering whether that was caught up by the recording. So do you want to say?
He didn't pay me to say. He didn't pay me to say that, by the
Now,
way.
what was it you just said, mate? I just didn't quite hear that.
Yeah, no. I just said, I just said it's a great day.
All right, here we go. Welcome back. This is Darren Mitchell, and you're listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader Podcast on what is it's a beautiful Melbourne day, although a bit windy. And another rarity for me because I'm talking another Melburnian. Although when you listen to this man speak, he's not a natural Melburnian. He's what we call a blow-in, but he's now been here for over 10 years, so he's a Melburnian. Mr. Andy Reid, coming in all the way from Berwick. How are you, my friend?
Man, I'm really, really good. Thank you. Really good. Yeah. Clearly not of this earth, this side of the world, but very much call Melbourne home for sure.
And I've got to ask you before we delve into this, where's the original birthplace?
Robin Hood country.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so East Midlands in England. So, the green tights are in the boot for the weekend. And
Nice. Bow and arrow, just in case.
Yeah, look in the white sock. Just the stuff down there to make me feel a bit better. But yeah, man, middle of England. My dad was a Geordie, so he's from Newcastle, so I spent a lot of time up in the northeast. Yeah, I'm bleed black and white, for my sins, but I moved over here in 2010, and I've never looked back, man. We're so, as much as, and I understand why a lot of native Australians are having a bit of a whinge about the state of the place right now.
Yeah.
Shit, it's still so much better than pretty much everywhere else. Like, it's still so much better. I went back to England in July last year. It is a hole. Like,
Was that right?
oh man, it's a disaster of a place now. So it just makes me feel so grateful to be in a town like Melbourne, to be fair.
It's interesting how, as you say, native people of Australia can get very critical, and particularly native people in Victoria, with what happened, in particular in the last 5 years around COVID in particular. But when it's all said and done, and sometimes you don't realize how good you've got it until you actually travel somewhere else and see how other people are living, and think, you know what, it isn't actually that bad, despite what I think it is.
No, big time, man. I'm very, very grateful that I am a foreigner, right? I mean, I might look the same. I'm still as foreign as anybody else, right? And I find that as a distinct advantage for me, whether it's in sales or just life generally, right?
Yeah.
Because I have got that perspective coming from, even though it's the middle of England, which is like supposed to be the most developed part in the world, right?
Yeah.
It's a dive, and especially being a dad of two young kids now, there's no way knowing where I'd rather raise my kids. It's not even a debate where
Yes.
I'd rather raise my kids, right?
Yeah.
And so every time I'm staring down the arse end of a car because there's like more traffic, which is what Melbourne is becoming renowned for, I just glance across and I see this cityscape, and I'm going, you know what? Far out. Like,
Yeah.
for a bit of traffic, it's not too bad a joint.
That's not.
No,
That's
it's
not.
really not.
It's not. It's first world problems.
Yeah, big time.
So Andy, you are. I want to delve into your background, and we're going to talk about sales and lots of stuff around sales leadership, values, and things like that. You run Andy Reid Coaching. You're Australia's #1 auctioneer. You're big in real estate. You're a dynamic speaker, success coach, and author of the recently released book Success Curious: How to Define and Achieve High Performance, mate. And you're also a podcaster, which we've now discovered as well. Before we jump into a lot of the topics that I'd like to cover off around success and sales, and maybe some of your approaches to sales, particularly from within the real estate industry, where did it all start for you? I'm always curious in terms of where people start out in their career, and what has led you to do what you do today.
So, engineering educated. So I've got a degree in mechanical engineering,
Okay.
which I did sod all with. But while I was doing my degree, as a lot of students do, I got a bar job. I got a job in hospitality at the soccer stadium up in Newcastle. So I was working for the team that I supported, and it wasn't a case of me falling into hospitality. I fell in love with hospitality.
Right.
It was a genuine love. It felt like engineering was not for me, right?
Yeah.
I knew it wasn't for me, but I just did it because I was told I was supposed to, right? That was the
Hmm.
thing I should do because I was good at maths and physics. Go be an engineer. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, go do that. And I was conforming to a degree. And then when I got the bar job, it was just a buzz. Like I had loads of people around me and I was interacting and it was pressure, fast paced, all that.
Yeah.
And some of the Geordie accents were thick even for me. And I'm like, wow, I'm having to get these guys to repeat 2 or 3 times. They must be getting shitty with me by now. But I loved it, man. The buzz of helping people have a good time
Yeah.
was addictive. It got addictive real fast. And so as I was working through my degree, I was working my way up the ladder of that establishment. And as I was coming to the end of my degree, they offered me a management contract to walk into the week I finished my last exam. So I was the bar manager for the corporate section of Newcastle. And so at 21, I was in charge of about 250 staff
Wow.
and turning over about 13.4 mil.
Wow.
That's what I was in charge of at 21, which was so much fun. 6 levels, 80 boxes. On match day, I was looking after, I think it was about just under 3,000 guests on a match day. Christmas time and all that sort of stuff. We did it within 3 weeks. We did for like Christmas functions and events. We turned over about 20, was it 20 or 31,000 covers within 3 weeks.
Wow.
So I loved it. I loved it. And work ethic is something I've never had a problem with either. So I was doing massive shifts. Me and my mate Paul have got the record for the longest ever single shift, which is 36 hours in
36 hours.
one sitting.
I
I was making some weird noises by the end of that one.
can bet
I
you
was getting
were.
delirious, man. It was weird. But anyway, very much not OH&S approved, right? Um, so yeah, so I was in hospitality for a long time in the UK and went from there to a hotel to a couple of hotels. And then my last gig was a GM of a vodka bar in Southwest London, which was so much fun. Met my partner, I met the mother of my kids.
Yeah.
Moved over to Australia, and her dad, I was actually going to get sponsored by Vodafone. As a customer service sort of experience manager at HQ, and dad owned a real estate franchise
Right.
and interviewed me over dinner. And he goes, "Mate, I think you'd be good at it." I was like, "All right, well, if I'm shit, bin me, and there'll be no hard feelings." And I sold 3 houses in the first month and thought, how easy is this? And then started trying to follow the textbook of how to be a real estate salesperson.
Yes.
And it almost drove me into a loony bin. I did
Wow.
nothing. I 3 sales in the first month, and then in the next 7 months, I got one listing, didn't manage to sell that, and did nothing. Like next to zero sales for the next 7 months. And I'm like going, I'm questioning life. I'm questioning my existence. I've been lucky in the fact that whatever I've turned my hand to, I've generally been okay at, right?
Yeah.
But to find something that was just not working, it was really, really detrimental to my health and well-being because you go from being a GM of a vodka bar in London, everybody wants to be your mate, right?
I
Right?
bet they
Everybody.
do.
Because that's the cool thing to know the gaffer, right? Of a
Yeah,
bar.
absolutely.
To go in from that from that to being a salesperson where people actively walk across the street because they see a real estate salesperson, right?
And when you say walking across the street, that's not walking across the street to see you. They're walking
It's
across the
walking
street
away
to
from.
avoid you.
Man, it's really demoralizing. Like I'm a big ugly bloody pom, right? But even for a big fart like me, it still makes me feel a bit sad, right? So
That's right.
but then the penny dropped when there was an American guy called Nick Stewart that just came into the office by chance, and he talked about. I knew what goals were,
Yeah.
but he sort of interpreted broadcast them to us in a way that made the penny drop. All right. And then, so I did a lot of deep did a lot of sort of deep thinking and whatnot. And after that, and it was almost like a flick of a switch because the next month I sold six and it just took off from there. And then after that, I was sort of selling between 60 to 90 properties a year,
Yeah.
without assistance or without a PA, without any assistance or anything like that, just the sales admin in the office.
Yeah.
Um, and then 2012 got thrown into auctioneering by the same ex-father-in-law who gave me 2 weeks notice and said, I think you'd be good at it. I'm like, shit. Okay. So, and I made two massive cock-ups that were caught on VHS. And
VHS. Well, you can destroy the tapes now.
and again, and just totally fell in love with it. It was a buzz that was akin to the hospitality buzz,
Yeah. Okay.
and it became addictive. Not because of the ego, not because of the attention, actually in spite of the attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so fell in love with the craft, became obsessed with the craft of auctioneering, and then from there, everything just kicked off. Been through mental health journeys, and now I finished up in the sales, took on my auction business full time, 2018. And then I built and sold a little marketing business in amongst that as well, because I'm a geek. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, and then full wind forward to now. I've I resisted coaching. I don't know about you, mate, but I didn't want to help arseholes make money. And there's lots of arseholes kicking around, right? So I tried to
There
avoid
are.
it. I tried to avoid it for a little while, but the resist. I couldn't resist. I couldn't hold it off because of the demand, which I'm lucky for. I'm grateful for. Yeah, and so started Andy Reid, and yeah, it's all sort of kicked on from there. Fell into a
Love it.
book. I just I feel like I'm very flippant with my life and whatnot, but I don't know, man. I'm a lover of chaos. I'm like the Joker off Batman. I just do things.
Love it. Love it.
Do things. So.
Mate, there's a lot in there, and I want to talk a little bit about goals. But before I do that, you mentioned selling some homes in the first month, and then not being able to sell any for the next seven, and then followed up with six in the
Mm,
following. What do you, if you look back on now, because always success leaves clues, and obviously, the opposite of success, and not, it's not necessarily failure, but non-success also leaves clues.
mm,
What do you put it down to? Do you put it down to the fact that there was like beginner's enthusiasm? Because we're going to jump into relationships and how a lot of people think the notion of relationships in sales is all the be all and end all, and how that
mm.
potentially is not the case.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that you then learned how to be a real estate salesperson, and for the next 7 months, it probably didn't work as well as you thought.
Mm.
What was the key learning through all that?
I was pretending to be something that I'm not. That's essentially like it.
Yeah,
Like I was pretending to be something that I'm not,
yeah,
and I am inherently I'm a good human being, and I'm not saying that the real estate sales manuals and whatnot are teaching people to be not good human beings.
yeah,
Far from it. But I'm a guy that needs to understand why, right? So if people just say, right, this is what you have to do, you have to say this, and then when this happens, you say this, and this is the script, and this is the dialogue, and you say that, and blah 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 blah.
yeah,
And if I'm not, if it's not explained to me why, or the importance of it, and the reactions, and what it is, the intentions of
yeah.
whatever it is, a script or a dialogue, whatever, then I'll take it literally. So I was trying to regurgitate this stuff
Right.
having been told that this is the right thing to do.
Hmm.
And so I've sort of, it was almost like a programming where I've forgotten that it was me that had got me the success that I'd got to that point. It wasn't the knowledge, it was
Mm.
my use of it, right? And my
Yes.
natural abilities. When I was working at the soccer ground, for example, I'd be dealing with on a match day, your common blue collar worker who works their arse off just to pay for the season ticket, right?
Yeah.
I'd be talking to them, and then within 2 minutes and a radio call, I'd be in a lift and talking to owners of football teams,
Yes.
multi-billionaires,
Yes.
right? Some of the most famous people in the world. And I just had this innate ability that I didn't even think about,
Mm.
that I could switch gears, and I could calibrate my communication style, my train of thought all of that to suit the person on the other side of the interaction, right? And I didn't
Yes.
realize it at the time. I was just doing it. But then when I hit a real wall with that sales side, with real estate, um, it was really interesting that it took someone to really sort of give me a lightning bolt of, hold on, Andy, you're not who you are. You were
Mm.
trying to be something that you're not. And
Yeah.
it was sort of one of those crossroad moments where I was like, screw it. My last effort at this is I'm just going to be me. I threw
Yeah.
the textbook out. I was all right. I'm just going to be me. And if that doesn't work, I'm done.
Hmm.
This isn't for me. And thankfully it worked out all right in the end. So it's there's I hate the word. I think authenticity is something that gets it's been completely abused and bastardized, right? I think it's just been completely overhand,
Yes.
and so I avoid using that word like the plague. Um, but being true to who you are, I think, is a much more literal
Mm.
and visceral way of saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And so I always talk about being true to who you are,
Yeah.
and bring it forward to recently with this book. I've had a real problem. I don't know about you, mate, but when you do a few different things, you sort of sometimes you can struggle to be able to define yourself and your reason
Yes.
for existing or
Yeah.
purpose.
Yeah.
And it was once I'd downloaded the first version of me into this book, that it really dawned on me why I exist. And it really brought everything home. And it made me feel so comfortable
Hmm.
in who I am, but it also made me feel really comfortable in who I'm not.
Yeah.
And in business, in sales, there's always that propensity to want to people please
Mm.
or appease in order to get the deal done because you think that's going to help you get the deal done because you're trying to, you're quashing your own emotions and your own sentiment in order to, massage a deal or whatever. But ultimately, like if you're not doing it by being true to who you are, you can have as many paychecks as you want. You're going to be so lonely internally, right? And
Totally.
money ain't going to make up for that,
No.
right? So, it's been a. It's going to sound so cliche. It's been it's been such a learning curve. Um, this sales thing, and I wish more people in sales realize that this is a massive personal journey. If you let it be a personal journey for yourself, as well as a career, geez Louise, you can grow. Like,
Oh
wow,
yeah.
wowee. Because none of us are the finished article, right?
Nah. There's always. I mean, we're always a work in progress. In fact, one of my earliest mentors used to say the fact that are you ripe and rotting, or are you green and growing? Right. So, and the metaphor was you think about an apple that falls from a tree. As soon as it falls from the tree, it might be ripe, but it starts to rot because it starts to
Mm.
oxidize. Right. So, never be satisfied with where you're at. Be happy with who you are, but don't be satisfied with where you're at because there's always another level to get to. And it's fascinating to see people who reach a plateau. And I was actually talking to somebody the other day about some bands that I was watching an old movie and remembering the band name and thinking, man, that band, I used to be really into them. But then if I look back, I haven't heard from them in like 10 years. And like, where are they? They probably plateaued. They got to the level of success they're happy with. They didn't see another evolution for themselves, and so they've sort of drifted into the wilderness, or they've started to rot.
Pretty much. And some of them look like they're physically rotting, bless their
Mm,
socks. To bless them. But yeah, you're absolutely right, man. I talk about this a little bit in the book, and I bring up the story of my old man when he was when bless him, he was on his deathbed, and all I could because he was sort of breathing, he was
yeah.
alive but not, and I'd always had this problem with chasing satisfaction. I'd like you get there to whatever it is, the goal,
Yes.
and be like, is this it? Or you'd be like, what's next? Or like it comes and goes so fast,
Yeah.
fleeting momentary feeling of joy, of
Mm,
success or whatever. And yeah, and I always had that problem, and it used to really compound some negativity that was whizzing around my head about never
mm,
being satisfied, right?
yeah.
Um, I'd absolutely smash something, or I'd win an award or anything like that, and I'd be too busy worried about why I couldn't have won better,
Yes.
opposed to winning the award, and Yeah, and it was when my old man was just breathing, and I could just hear his breathing. That's all I could hear. It was me and him in that palliative care room.
Mm.
It dawned on me. I was like, shit. I didn't get to ask him if he was satisfied, but he communicated with me the one of the most critical lessons in life, which is while you've got time, while there's time in the game, there's always time to win or lose. There's always time to score goals or concede goals, right? If you
Yes.
put it into a
Yes.
very sort of bro sports analogy. Um, while there's time in the game of life, there's always time to
Yeah.
do better or do worse.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. And what you said before, you got to be happy, but you should never be satisfied
Mm.
until you've got a full body of work. You can never say if you're satisfied or not because it's not complete.
No.
A complete body of work that you can look at and go, right, am I satisfied with that body of work?
Mm.
Makes sense. So you can do it in micro senses.
Oh, you can.
If you've got a project, right, look at the entirety of the project and you go, right, am I satisfied with the level of effort, the level of performance, the level
Mm.
of output, sales numbers, KPIs, P&L, whatever? Are we satisfied with that project? Right?
Yeah.
And that's a very yes or no. You can't be
Mm.
satisfied or ecstatic or excellent, right? And that's where I think a lot of people get it twisted because you know all those multi sort of surveys, or you're at school where you get satisfactory, excellent, or
Yeah.
satisfactory, good, excellent, or unsatisfactory. Realistically, there's only satisfied or not.
Yeah.
Did you complete the task or not?
Yes. Correct.
To the so anyway, so yeah, yeah, I like that. I like that topic of satisfaction. It's an interesting one, and it holds a lot of people back, I reckon. Um,
Why do you think that is? Is because they're not satisfied with where they're at, or deeply they're not satisfied with who they are being, which is stopping them from being able to achieve what they ultimately want to achieve.
I think it's probably one of two ways, man. I think it's either if you look at it from an overachiever, like someone who just keeps achieving, 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 achieving,
Mm.
they'll always feel that sense of never being good enough.
Mm.
Which is a prick of a feeling. That's a horrible, horrible feeling, which I've carried for a long, long time and still do to an extent, if I'm being honest. Um, but then you have the other ones where they didn't get the sense of satisfaction, they didn't get the buzz that they thought they were going to get, and therefore they don't feel that it's worth doing again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then they just dismiss it as a path as a path for them because they go, oh, this doesn't feel anything like what I thought it was going to feel like.
Yeah.
Whether it's a new career path, right? For example,
Yeah.
they want to start a new career journey on a completely new like industry or whatever, thinking that right, that looks so exciting from the outside. Da 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 da. They
Mm.
start on the bottom rung of the ladder, they go up a rung and it's nowhere near the glorification that was sold to him from the
Yeah.
outside looking in. And they go, you know what, this doesn't feel like, and especially right now, the impatience that society exudes in Spain makes it so difficult for people when they're not feeling that sense of satisfaction. They don't feel that they're on the right path, so they'll switch.
Yeah.
And then it's like that classic sort of cartoon where you got two people digging for the diamonds or whatever, and one stops halfway through or one stops just before they're about to get there, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
So I think that's the two ways that it stops people because yeah, the way that it stopped me in the past, like it just drives you into insanity if you're not
Mm.
careful. And it did for me. So anyway.
So then I wanted to ask you then about goals because you mentioned the US guy came in, talked to you about goals, and the next month you sold 6 homes, right?
Mhm.
So do you put that down to the fact that you embraced goal setting as a means to achieve something, or was it almost like accumulation of all the work that you invested up until that point that this person came into your world at the right moment and there was something that he said that flicked a switch in you that enabled you to achieve stuff? Because the reason I want to ask that is a lot of people have goals. Like in sales, we have goals, which is a target you set. I don't know a salesperson's ever been satisfied with a target they've been given. And it's almost like, well, you achieve it or you don't, which means you're successful or you're not, right? Which is a bit of a fallacy, which I don't necessarily agree with. But what was it for you from a goal setting point of view? Because we've also talked about the fact that are we satisfied with what we're doing? Because often you get to a goal and it may not necessarily deliver the feeling that you thought it would. So the question there is goals the be all and end all?
Quick answer, no. The reason why, and I've been able to articulate it a lot better more recently, is the way that goals were interpreted to me made me realize that the sale of a property wasn't what I was looking for.
Yeah.
That wasn't what I was working for, right? Um, um, it gave me a degree of perspective and a degree of detachment from the immediate outcome because it was one small drop in an ocean that is my life, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
It's one small setback or one small win. Either
Yeah.
way, it's not hugely significant in the grand context, right?
Yeah.
And that's what that did for me. It helped me to not be as white knuckle about each individual transaction because I'm a competitive prick, right? I don't like losing. So if I lose something, if I
Yeah.
lose a game, it used to piss me off, something chronic. And then when I've got it interpreted to me, Nick Stewart's the guy's name, and when I got it interpreted to me in the way that he interpreted it, it made me go, right, okay, hold on. All the stuff that I'm doing, prospecting, buyer appointments, listing presentations, all this sort of stuff, it's all with a view to achieving something greater in my life, right? Which
Yeah.
was the home at the time, it was the home, the marriage, the kids, because it was all pre that,
Yeah.
pre all of that. And 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 it just gave me that degree of separation between the immediate transaction and
Hmm.
the context that it had in my life. So that was the opening. That was a real sort of win. I've been able to interpret it a lot better recently when I was reading some because I'm a geek, mate. I was reading some. I've been a purveyor of classical studies,
Okay.
ancient philosophies and all that since college. And I was read this bit from Aristotle, and he talks about the master good,
Hmm.
and he says the purpose of learning how to paint is not for the painting; it's to become an artist.
Hmm.
You don't set out to learn the guitar because then you can play like you want to become a guitar player,
Yes.
right? You want to become an artist. You want to become a master of that paintbrush or whatever it is, right? You're not doing it for the paintings. You're not doing it for the songs. You're doing it for the skill, for the
Yeah.
becoming of,
Yes.
for the identification of. And so if you're to interpret goals in that sense, goals are great, but the stuff that you become in the trip to achieving ticking off those boxes,
Yeah.
that's what you're actually after. So if you
Mm.
focus too much on the end product, you'll miss the stuff that you're actually there to benefit from.
Yes.
And Alan Watts, the British philosopher, like who he's obviously dead now, but was one of the purveyors. He brought Eastern philosophies over to the West, and he talks about it linguistically, where he says there never exists, right? And people say, "Oh, we'll get there,"
Yeah.
but by the time you get there, it becomes here.
That's it.
So therefore, do you ever get there?
No. It's
Right?
like tomorrow never comes.
Exactly, exactly. Put it into a Ronan Keating song, and Alan Watts, Ronan Keating, same. And
Both great philosophers.
hardly. So it's that whole thing of because success in Latin or the derivation of it in Latin is actually it's to progress.
Mm.
It's not the end point.
No.
It's a verb to
Yeah.
progress, accelerate. Right. So, which is really, really interesting. So, when you think about it in terms of its original derivations and the fact that we've become a very materialistic society whereby success is defined by the stuff in many people's eyes. It's great having the stuff, but if you become a wanker in the process, that's what you're going to be known for on your gravestone, right? Like,
Well, it's so true, and it's interesting you mentioned some philosophers like Aristotle and Ronan Keating. One of
hey,
the there's a couple of
knowledge comes from everywhere, my friend.
it
Knowledge comes
does,
from
it does, and
everywhere.
sometimes the least expected places. But I remember listening to like I was a big fan of Earl Nightingale, and he always used to say success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. which talks about that. And then another great philosopher was a guy by the name of Jim Rohn, who
Ah,
passed as well. And he would always talk about the
Godfather.
fact that it wasn't the achievement of an outcome that was the most important thing. It was the person you become along the way so that you have the capability to accept the responsibility that comes with achieving the outcome.
Big
And
time. And he talks about it from a millionaire's terms, right? He
he
goes,
does.
if you get $1 million, you best learn how to be a millionaire.
Correct.
All right.
Correct.
Otherwise, and he says it, and it's like it's his all-time classic seminar that he did when he's got a
Mm.
glass of Coca-Cola and it's like chalk and
Yeah.
board and all that sort of shit. And he goes,
Yeah.
yeah, you give everybody the same amount of money, you could guarantee it's going to end up in the same pockets.
Correct.
So cool. I love Jim Rohn, man.
Correct.
Love him.
So let's talk about this topic of success. Because your business is your book, sorry, is Success Curious.
Mm,
When you talk about making success more accessible,
mm.
what do you mean? What's the context behind that?
I believe that society has created a big chasm between the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah.
Um, I don't blame social media because social media is just an inanimate object. It's the
Yes.
way that humans have been exposed by it,
Mm.
right? That I have a problem with. And for so many people, and it's so you said it before, success. I don't either whether it was on the corner or just before. Success is different. Definition of success is different for every single human being, right?
Yeah.
Um, and yet, because of the commoditization of knowledge around success and what have you, and the way that success has been interpreted by society, and the way it's been exposed by the likes of social media, um, it's creating this real vast gap between the vast majority of people who, by human rights, have yeah, they've got a right to feel a sense of success, i.e.,
Mm.
to feel a sense of progress, right?
Yes.
That's part of being a human being.
Mm.
And yet, the problem that we've got in society now is the fact that because of the way that success has been interpreted, so many people they try and live success through someone else's eyeballs because that's what they've seen on Instagram. And that
Yeah.
influence said that this is what you do need to do in order to be successful. They try it, it doesn't work, and then they feel worse about themselves because they feel
Yes.
less worthy of being a human being, if you were to put it into real essential terms,
Mm.
which is a massive pain in the ass.
Mm.
So I'm trying to fix that, right? And or try and sort of shift the needle around that because, and again, it's through my own, depths of struggling to exist on a couple of occasions, which I'm, not no harm in sharing that success to be if you're not progressing as a human being, you are constantly questioning who you are as a human being and why you are and whether you should exist as a human being, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, it's in the DNA of human being to always be progressing in some way, shape, or form.
Mm.
That is essentially, by definition, success.
Yep.
And so what I want to do it, and the problem is the fact that because there's all these self-help programs and all this sort of stuff, and I bought a whole bunch of them myself, and you know what I mean, and done sod all with them, and so on and so forth. Um, and it's like when you do courses, mate. I'm sure if you've gone out to coach teams or whatever,
Yeah.
and you know for a fact, unfortunately, within 48 hours, invariably, but it's not your fault, not their fault. It is it's their it's the lack of understanding, which again is no one's fault. It's just an awareness issue that in order to feel progress, you need to know thyself first.
Mm.
In order to know where you are, in order to know where you want to go to, and in order to be able to actually know whether you're moving forward or not.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so one of my best mate over in the UK, who's been my best mate since I was 8. The arsehole gave me a much better summary of my book after I'd done a load of media, right? So I was really fucking really appreciative of that. And he goes, dude, you know what this book is? I went, what? He goes, it's the book you should read before you try and do any self-development.
Interesting.
I'm like, shit, you're right. Like, why did my PR firm come up with this? I'm like, I'm like, you're spot on, man, because that's what it is. It's the fundamental foundations of what you need to have in place in order to have a solid base to build from,
Mm.
right? And then go do your 4 hour work, your 4 hour weeks, and your Tony
Yeah,
Robbins,
yeah,
and all that sort of shit, right?
yeah,
Go do your fight, your bloody cold walks. Um, but this thing brings it back to a fundamental, and I'm so self-deprecating in it, it's not even funny, right? Like I'm telling in half the book is learn from my mistakes, not from my success, right?
yeah,
Learn from the shit I've done wrong.
yeah,
Right?
yeah. But that tells you a lot. Well, it tells you you're having a crack, but it
Uh,
says you've got a definition of your definition of success. Therefore, is not the achievement of something, because too many people, and I see this a lot in corporate, they want to avoid making mistakes because they think that's a bad thing. What is
mm,
everybody going to think of them? What are their customers going to think of them? What are they going to think of themselves if they do something, try something, and it doesn't work? Does that mean they're a quote unquote failure? Well, I actually say to leaders all the time, what's the biggest mistake you've made in the last week? And when they say, I haven't made any, what is it? What do you think that tells me?
no progress, man.
You've made no progress. You haven't given a shit. You haven't jumped out of your comfort zone. And just think about this. The example you're setting now for your team is to do exactly the same thing. So you now have everybody in a quasi comfort zone that are not achieving anything because they're not extracting their potential and not having a crack.
Big
So
time.
I love the fact you've spent a lot of time self-deprecating and focusing on your quote unquote failures and mistakes. In the book, you talk about it's broken down into four elements: success, connection, influence, and happiness.
Mm.
Can you just elaborate on those in terms of, I guess, elements or foundations for what we're talking about?
So one can't exist without the other. For me, those four elements coexist in an
Mm,
ecosystem that allows that feeling of progress, right?
mm,
Because Simon Sinek said it in a podcast recently. Success is a team effort. We
mm.
as human beings are pack animals. We are meant to be in tribes, right? And
Yes.
you're starting to see it come back into society a lot greater these days. You know, Gen Z's got a real, because of the amount of noise that's going on in the world, they're really struggling to really listen to their own identity. So therefore, they need to gain an identity by attaching to a greater purpose, a greater
Yeah.
cause. That's why there's so many more protests going on in the world these days.
Yeah.
And and again, not their fault. Um, um, and so the book starts with the theorizing of success, right? And the way that the book's set out is in the four sections, but it's basically 17 or 18 questions that are some of the most common questions that get asked when
Mm,
it comes to success, you know, imposter syndrome and all that sort of stuff, right?
yeah.
And then once we've dealt with what success is as a definition, and by the end of the first section, people will start to feel like they're gaining an understanding of what success actually means to them.
Yeah.
I then delve into connection, influence, and happiness because there's no point being successful if you're not happy, right? You don't know if you're really happy because happiness is a thing that's shared. It's like there's no point having abundance if you've got no one to share it with,
True.
right? So that's where the connection piece comes in. In order to gain connection and gain any foothold when it comes to success from a progression point of view, you need to have people that want to follow you in that respect. Not necessarily, you know, followers on Instagram. It could just
No.
be your loved ones,
Yeah.
right? So you need to have a level of influence over the people that are in your ecosystem as well.
Yeah.
And influence is a really interesting one because it's been bastardized by modern where everyone's trying to be an influencer now.
An influence.
And if you're not an influencer, you hate influencers because you're not influencing, right? But the reality is nothing would ever progress in the world without having influential people.
Mm,
You look at back in the day before all these Insta famous sort of tits and tan and all that sort of stuff. Jesus was a fairly big influencer,
it was.
right?
It
Jesus,
was.
you know, Muhammad, if you're that way inclined,
Yeah.
or you know, Nelson Mandela. Any major influence in any major change in the world was brought about by someone that had a great level of influence,
Yes.
right? That drove change,
Mm,
right? And so without influence, the world would be nowhere.
Mm.
right? It's put it into a good thing. So it's a good thing to be an influencer as long as your intention, like,
That's it.
you could say irrespective of what your intentions are, if just to make money, then go for your life. But if you've got well set intentions based around an understanding what success looks like, an understanding of what happiness looks like for you, and then there's that chicken and egg sort of scenario. What comes first, success or happiness? Which is, and I've got there's a really interesting study about from the US military around that. And then the connection piece is fairly self-explanatory, right?
Mm.
Confidence comes from connection. Oh no, connection comes from confidence, sorry. And confidence can only come through competence.
Yes.
And there's an amazing study about the connection between the human and the situation, or the human and the scenario, the human and the act, or whatever it is they're doing, when it comes to intrinsic motivation as well, like internal motivation,
Yeah.
and flow state essentially. Oh, no, it's just that easy. No, 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 no. You just had a level of intrinsic motivation because you had autonomy, you were connected to the job, and you've got a level of competence that allowed you to do it, right? So yeah, man, and we just tackle a whole bunch of questions that I know I've had problems with. And then like I said, I get my geek on, and there's a bunch of studies in there that corroborate some of the waffle that I bang on about, and then some stories that will make you giggle.
Love it. Hey, I do want to ask you about one of these connections, and that is the success happiness connection. So
Mm.
there's a lot of and maybe this is a societal thing because a lot of people think, well, I can only be happy when I'm successful, right? Based on your research, based on your experiences, what's your thoughts on that? Because I have a different view.
Well, I sort of mentioned, as I mentioned just before, there's an incredible study that was done by the US military. And it was a very recent study, I think it's 2021. And we're not just talking 100 soldiers. They did 997,000 soldiers in the US military. Nearly a million soldiers got tested with this, right?
Wow,
So you could argue that it's a fairly sturdy,
good sample size.
yeah, you know what I mean? Geez, they don't do it in half measures. And they studied across a bunch of metrics, both psychological and psychosomatic and whatnot.
Yeah.
Um, the relationship between how happy a soldier was and the level of achievement, like the level of performance that they had, right?
Yeah.
And it was unequivocal. The soldiers that were happy being soldiers, and they were
Mhm.
happy because they were connected to being a soldier. It was part
Yeah.
of their DNA to be a soldier. They felt like they were where they were supposed to be as a
Yeah.
soldier.
Yeah.
Won more medals, succeeded to a great degree of efficiency in all their tasks, and achieved more while losing less. Um, you know, by any success metric from a military point of view,
Yeah.
they were far and away way more successful because of the fact that they were happy in who they were and where they were and what they were and why they were,
Yeah.
right?
Nice.
And so, but and I have a lot of people that ask me as a sort of retort to that, well, how on earth can you be happy if you're broke and don't have anywhere to go and have got no direction and all this sort of stuff and blah 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 blah. I'm like, well, realistically, the reason why you're in the position that you're in is because you know, no one's fault. You don't know what it is in your DNA that makes you happy. You don't know
Mm.
what it is, and you can't define who you are,
Mm.
right? If you can't define who you are, how on earth can you stand a chance of being happy, right? You put it in a sales, put it in a very practical sales perspective, right?
Yeah.
For the sake of the podcast. I know that I'm a way more effective salesperson because of the fact that I've taken the time to understand who the hell I am.
Yes.
And because I know who I am, I can relate any task that I'm doing to the DNA of my existence,
Hmm.
right? because of that, it feels like I'm naturally where I'm supposed to be at that moment, at that one specific point in time,
Yep.
right? And so therefore, I'm content. You might switch the word happiness for content, right? Because you don't have to be happy because of the fact that you're broke, but you can be content in the fact that I'm in a space where I feel like I'm where I'm supposed to be, and therefore I feel that if I continue on this path, then I will make progress in some way, shape, or form, which, as we talked about, is definition of success, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, man, it's not. I think maybe happiness. Maybe I've got it wrong by writing happiness as one of the sections. Maybe I should have written contentment or something. I don't know. But because like we've talked about, satisfaction can be connected to happiness real fast. And then if you're not satisfied, how can you be happy, sort of thing? And again, drove me down a mental illness path, which wasn't pretty. Um, but there's too much evidence there to see the people that are truly elite or successful, it is because they are where they're supposed to be.
And they're really clear on who they are. And you said it before, they're not trying to be somebody who they're not.
Yep.
And there's a difference between modeling somebody and modeling excellence. So taking a strategy from what you do, Andy, in terms of how do you do that? How do you manage to captivate an audience to get a result at an auction, right? That's a skill set. And I reckon I can, if I can articulate the strategy and the thinking process, I reckon I can install that in myself, in my own DNA, in my own environment, and I could replicate levels of success in a different industry by understanding how you do that. But I'm not going to be you. I never can be you, right?
100%, man. I've got two little stories around that. Gordon Ramsay was someone questioned Gordon Ramsay one time. Or was it Jamie Oliver, one of the big chefs?
Mm.
And they said, "Why do you keep putting cookbooks out? Why do you keep giving away your secrets?" And he goes, "Because it's all good knowing what to do, but none of them are me,
No.
right?" And that was a really cool one. The better one, the more personal one, was when I first started writing this book, right? And as you can tell, I'm words of one syllable in the main, and and what complicate shit. And but when I first started writing the book, I thought I needed to sound clever.
Mm.
And believe it or not, I do know a few big words, right? A handful. I was trying to jimmy all of them in, right? I was trying to be all Shakespearean and whatnot, right, man? And and I sent the first chunk of the book to the publisher to see if I was on the right track. And she sent me an email back with one sentence.
Yeah.
Wasn't even exchanging pleasantries. It was Andy dot dot dot. Where's all the swearing? So I called her and I was like, "What do you mean?" And she goes, "Andy, please don't take this the wrong way." And because I said, "I'm trying to sound clever, man." She goes, "Andy, that doesn't suit you."
Yeah.
And I went, "Is that a slap or a tickle? I'm not sure. I'm not sure which one that is there." And she goes, "No, what I mean is," and this was such a cool thing, and it unlocked issues around imposter syndrome, all sorts of stuff. It was so fucking cool. Excuse my French. I should have asked if I could swear.
No, go for it.
Anyway, she goes, "Andy, there are millions of people that know what you know." I went, "Right." She goes, "I didn't give you a publishing deal because of what you know. I gave you a publishing deal because of who you are."
Mm.
And I was like, that just put me on my heels. Because the problem that a lot of people have when it comes to trying to chase success is they feel that they need to have this magical, wondrous idea that is only theirs and it's them that came up with it and it's they're the OGs of it. And that's the only route to success, right?
Yeah.
Bollocks. Absolute bullshit. There are millions of people that know the stuff that me and you know, Darren, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Loads, right? A lot of the stuff that I've said today, you've probably said to umpteen number of people in a few different ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? None of it's new, but there's only one me that can deliver it in a way that I can deliver it.
Correct.
And the imposter syndrome comes from the fact that you feel you don't have something to say that's original because you're seeing
Mm.
other people say it and do it and whatnot, and therefore you feel like you can't go and say and do because other people have done it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that therefore creates imposter syndrome because how dare you try and impose on
Mm.
their knowledge and awareness and blah blah blah. That's the thing. Accepting that loads of people know what you know is such a release of
Mm.
pressure.
Mm.
It's mad. It's so cool. It was one of the best things that came out of writing this bloody book that nearly killed me, right? Is the fact that it's cool that loads of people know what I know, but the way that I articulate it will be the thing that defines me, not the stuff.
Correct.
It is the flavor that I add
Yeah.
that makes it what it is.
And that's what makes people like you such an attractive force. And I'm sure you've got people who wanting you to do their auctions as an auctioneer because of who you are. And yes, it's theatre, right? And you've got to create emotion within that sort of environment, but you don't have to do that at the expense of who you are at your core. And the
No,
biggest work that we ever have to do is the work on ourselves and never have to feel the pressure to be somebody who we are not.
big
And I
time,
reckon that comes back to the happiness part as well. That if you can lie in bed at night and say, you know what, I'm really happy, I'm really content with who I am. I know exactly who I am, what I stand for, what my values are. I don't have to pretend anymore. Now, does that mean there'll be people out there that don't resonate with me? Yes, that's fine. But there's also going to be a lot that do resonate with me because I'm really clued in as to who I am. And that is such an attractive force.
mate. I used to hate being called raw. People used to call me raw, right? And it used to do my head in, like quietly, because I knew that they were trying to say it as a compliment, right?
Mm,
But internally, my interpretation of that, based on some shitty old wiring that I've fixed now, thankfully, um, was raw equals underdone, not
yes,
cooked,
right.
not ready for consumption, right?
Yeah,
Um, and I had a lawyer mate of mine. We were having dinner one night. He goes, "Dude, the hell are you going on about?" I went, because he called me raw. He called me raw
yeah,
again. He was a mate. I was like, "Dude, like, can you not?" He goes, "What the fuck do you mean?" He goes, "That is what people want to get to, right?"
yes,
I went, "What do you mean by that?" He goes, "Dude, to be raw is to be the truest version of yourself, unequivocally, unapologetically, right?" And he goes, "You don't realize everybody's trying to get to that.
yeah,
So when people are calling you raw, they're just admiring the fact that you are who you are.
yeah,
And it's obvious that you are who you are. And it is not even a debate as to whether you're hiding anything because you're clearly not, right?" And I'm like, "Fuck, I didn't think about it like that." And he goes, "Well, start thinking about it like that, man.
yeah.
Because irrespective of whether people agree with you, irrespective of whether people vibe with you, irrespective of whether people are offended by the swearing or whatever the case may be,
Mm,
because of how raw, in inverted commas, I am,
yeah,
people can still appreciate who I am
yeah,
because of the fact that I am what people try to be."
mm,
The auctioneering thing, it's the sense of freedom that it comes into my head when I pick up the gavel and I start rocking and rolling is because, like, for everybody else, it's one of the biggest days in their lives, right?
yeah,
Vendors moving out, moving on. Buyers, next big chapter, next biggest, like one of the biggest investments they'll ever make.
yeah,
Agents, reputation, income, commission,
yeah,
all that. I'm just rocking. I'm just turning up to have a shout, right? Like, like for everybody else is shitting themselves, and I've got sunsets and sandy beaches going on in my head, right? Because I haven't got anywhere to hide. All I
no,
can be is me.
yeah.
So good.
And and I don't want this to sound flippant, but that leads to success because you no longer have to pretend. There's no having to mix my P's and Q's. You get the raw me. We don't want to use the word authentic, but you get the real you. And it's like, hey, the outcome will be the outcome. Either way, I'm all good. It's all good.
Anxiety, right? When people get anxious, when people listen to you, or if you're trying to sell to someone and you're invoking an anxious reaction in the person that you are delivering to or broadcasting to or
Mm,
talking to, that anxiety doesn't come from what it is that you're saying. It comes from the fear of the unknown that is
mm,
created by a human safety mechanism, which is your brain, that is going, oh, I don't know if this person's telling the whole truth here. Is this person really who they are?
yeah.
This person's intentions actually what they say they are?
Yeah.
And that's an energy, that's an aura, that's a thing, right?
Mm.
That's a very real, visceral thing. And I guess it's why people tend to feel pretty chilled out around me, right? Because they know what they're gonna get. So they don't have to worry about the fear of the unknown because whatever's coming out of my mouth, at least they know it's coming from me. You know what I mean? Like, whether they agree with it or not is another matter, but at least they know it's me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So with this, and I did mention I wanted to ask you a question around sales because we talked before we pressed record, and you've talked about the fact that relationships in sales is, well, the notion of sales being all about relationships is probably right. And I think we
Mm.
talked a little bit before we pressed record about, the counselor versus the doctor.
Yes.
Um, with all the stuff we've spoken about, it's probably a good way to sort of segue into the closing of the episode.
Mm.
What I'm not saying, and I'll be interested in your take on this. We're not saying that relationships are not important because relationships are important because at the end of the day, people buy from people who they know they like, they trust, and who they remember. But the notion that all of sales is all about relationships. If I'm being really raw, if I'm being a good servant, and if I'm actually being able to disassociate from any attachment to an outcome, that is, I don't have commission breath, I don't have desperation, I can be a good person, a good human being, and I can still be really direct with a person and diagnose what the problem is without having to jeopardize the relationship. Now, I'd
Mm.
love your take on that as we close.
Mm.
And I'll leave it there. I'll let you pick up the story.
So, yeah, this whole fascination with relationships is starting to get on my tits a little bit because of the fact that if you think about the topic, the word relationship, right?
Mm,
My, gee, kids are the best educators, right? So I said to my daughter one time, I said, Lizzie, she's 10. And I said, she's 10 going on like 25. And I said, Lizzie, Eliza, and she goes, yeah. Said, when I say the word relationship, who's the first person that comes into your head? She goes, well, you and mum. Cool. Asked the boy. She said, you and mummy.
yeah,
6. Well, cool. So I then, one weekend, I think I asked about 50 different real estate agents, right?
yeah,
Just on the fly, right? Just not set it up, just
yeah,
natural. But dude, when I say the word relationship, who's the first thing that pops into your head? Who's
yeah,
the first person? And it was either parents, spouse, or kids,
yeah.
universally, right? And what I'm getting to with that is the fact that if we as salespeople bang on about, or sales leaders, sorry, bang on about it all being about relationships, then if you think about it, what we're doing is actually creating a level of inauthentic behavior based on who we see as relationship worthy in our lives, right?
Mm,
So relationships are reserved for the loved ones. You have a relationship with your partner, you have a relationship, you know, you have a relationship with your dog because you love your dog loves you, whatever, right? But to say that we need to focus on building relationships with our clients, these people that, yes, they're super important and they're human beings and they need to be treated as human beings and not as commodities,
mm,
100%, but they're going to come and go out of our lives pretty quick,
yeah,
right? That's tiring.
mm,
That's really tiring. And I'm sorry, but there's not one human on this planet that has got enough energy to build relationships to the level that we understand relationships to be from a young age, from babies, from when we
Yeah.
were born, right? We ain't got the energy, we ain't got the brain power, we haven't got the heart power in order to do that
Mm.
authentically,
Yes.
right? So it's not all about relationships because when a client comes to you with a problem that your service or your product looks to solve, they're not coming to you for a relationship. They're coming to you for a solution,
Mm.
right? And if you think about it that way, your customer's coming to you for a solution and you're trying to come to them for a relationship, you've
Yeah.
instantly got a disconnect between the intentions of both sides,
Correct.
right? Which is a problem in the first place.
Mm.
Customers aren't after relationships, they're after a confidence that your solution is the right solution that fixes their problem,
Yeah.
right? So I would argue that sales is not all about relationships, it's all about confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Now, confidence, when you break that down, for me, like irrespective of what sort of skill set or what attribute it is, you pretty much could bring it down into two parts: relatability and credibility.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Relatability is, does this salesperson, does this human that I'm approaching understand what my problem is? Right? Credibility, does their solution fix my problem?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And as a salesperson, they're the only two things that we need to focus on.
Yeah.
Now, I have this thing in a book that is probably the only original idea called the line of confidence. And at one end, it's got humility, and at the other end, it's got arrogance,
Okay.
right? And if you are trying too much to relate and trying too much to build a relationship, you end up going too far down the humility side of the
Mm.
curve, right? And there's a bell curve, right?
Yeah.
If you go too far down the credibility piece, the knowledge, you can come across as really arrogant because you're not
Yeah.
paying attention to them. You just have this unequivocal belief that what you know is going to fix their problem,
Yeah.
right? And it's square peg into whichever hole they're presenting to you, right?
Yes.
The middle line between the two, which is where you get a peak in terms of connection, is confidence, where you can have that mix, that blend between the two. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a dynamic sort of thing, right? Because confidence is a two-way street.
Yeah.
You can only define confidence by understanding where the person that's delivering and the person that's receiving are on the same page and they have
Mm.
that level of connection,
Yeah.
right? And therefore, in yourself as a salesperson, if you have a level of competence that you know your stuff, but you have a level of awareness that allows you to be able to take your knowledge and apply it to the situation or the problem at hand as pertains to that specific customer,
Mm.
you are way more likely to create a connection that leads to an outcome that satisfies both parties,
Mm.
right? So my argument is that if you focus too much on building relationships, right, you'll get it right. I mean, a broken clock's right twice a day, right?
That's right.
You'll get it right once or twice, right? And you'll win business once or twice.
Yeah.
But how many, like recently, mate, you've been in this game for years, right?
Yeah.
How many times have you heard more recently, like salespeople that are complaining because they build these great connections, but then they just don't get the business, or they get told, "Oh, we really like you," but
Yes.
and the amount that is happening is increasing.
Totally.
And the reason why it's increased is because people are too busy focused on the relationships and are not focused enough on actually showing that they know their shit and that their solution actually is the thing for them.
Correct. 100%.
So that's my theorizing on it all, is the fact that screw building relationships, build a level of confidence between the two parties that relies on credibility and relatability, and the solution will be found and received.
Yes. And through that process, you can still form some form of relationship. It just won't be the relationship that perhaps we would. You're not necessarily going to go out and have a steak and a bottle of red wine with your customer, right? But you might take them to the footy or whatever the case might be.
Oh, look, and the a relationship is a natural thing. Bring it back
Mm.
to what I said about
Yeah.
like when people are asked who they think of when you say the word relationship, it is people that they have a natural connection with.
Yes.
The end.
Yes.
The end.
Yep.
So trying to build relationships is just trying to force something that should be a natural process.
Yep.
Now, that relationship might end up just being a temporary relationship based on the fact that you've solved the problem, you've gone your separate ways.
Yep.
Totally cool. Keep them on your
Yep.
database, whatever, right? And they remain a connection in that space. Um, and then some you end up building relationships with because you get a natural affinity to them, and
Mm.
and then it just grows naturally. Wonderful. Robert's your
Yep.
father's brother in that respect.
Yep.
It becomes a long-term relationship.
Does.
But I think the problem, the language that we need to change is the fact that you don't want to build long-term relationships. You don't want to focus on building long-term relationships with every damn client because, as we said before, if we know who we are, we've got to understand that we ain't gonna build relationships naturally with everybody, right? We've already
See
said.
it.
But we can look at building long-term connections.
Mm.
Those long-term connections can still remain in that sort of space of I'm the customer with the problem, you're the professional with the solution sort of thing,
Yep.
right? It's like your doctors,
Yep.
right? You go to a doctor because you have a connection with the doctor because the doctor's made you feel better when you felt
Mm.
ill one time, right? So you want to go back to that doctor because your connection with that doctor has led you to having a problem solved,
Totally.
right? Hence, and then you could argue then that focus on connection as opposed to relationship has got a greater chance of building a level of loyalty to your service and or product, right?
Mm. Yep.
Because you are proving time and time. Loyalty is only built through proof of concept, right? I think.
Yeah.
Now you can
Totally.
be the best guy in the world, but no one's going to be loyal to you if you ain't fixing their problem.
No, exactly right. Exactly right.
Make sense?
100%. 100%. Mate, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I highly encourage people to get a hold of your book, but also connect with you. Where is the best place for them to do both? Getting connections with the great man, but also getting a copy of the what soon to be will be the best-selling book, if not the
Amazon,
world.
Amazon the book.
Yep.
Amazon the book, and it's available. It's available in Australia, New Zealand, US, Canada, UK, soon to be India now, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
And they're not going to translate it, so I'm thinking there's going to be some interesting Google searches when they look at some of them words. Going to be some interesting Google histories. Anyway, yeah. So Amazon for the book, and then I'm a really easy guy to find on any of the socials. You can go on Instagram or LinkedIn and just search at Andy Reid Coaching.
Yep.
That's my handle on both of those. I'm available at my website's andyreid.com.au. Simplest, I love simple. Simple's great. So just Google Andy Reid, and there'll be two people that will come up. It'll be the NFL coach of the Chiefs
Yes.
and me.
And you.
Go for,
And and
go for.
and you probably come up first, right? Because you're more famous than him.
Ironically, it's so funny around about Super Bowl time. I get fan mail
Oh, is that
from the
right? Is
Kansas City Chiefs. I get fan mail from people trying to tell me what to do with the team.
that
It's so
right?
funny. It's so funny. Anyway,
That is hilarious.
that's another story.
Mate, I'll put those all in the show notes. This has been a phenomenal conversation. So I want to thank you for bringing huge amounts of value and humor and humanness to the podcast. And thanks for being a guest on the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast.
Man, I can't thank you enough for having me. I bloody love this. This has been awesome. I'm really glad we've connected, man. I'm really, really glad.
All the best, mate, and good luck for the auctions on the weekend.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Only a couple because it's Anzac weekend as
Yep,
as we record this. We're going into Anzac weekend, so there's not as many this weekend, but May is looking mental.
love it. All the
Yeah.
best, bud. Thank you for listening to the Exceptional Sales Leader podcast. I trust the information in this episode has been helpful in your journey towards becoming exceptional. And remember, please take the time to rate the show, subscribe to the show so other people can find it. But also, if I can help you, jump on my calendar, go to leadwithdarren.com and let's have a conversation about how I can help you along your journey to being exceptional.